Some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies.
So, welcome to episode 5, and you may remember that the inquest into the untimely death of Paloma Shemirani has started, and various people are attending this and trying to make what they will out of it. Also, in the United States of America, Robert Kennedy Jr. has decided that there is a massive problem with organ theft of people who are having their organs removed from their bodies whilst they're still alive, only to find that on close examination, this has never once happened, ever, and it's a complete misrepresentation of certain reports and papers and studies. And this is a bit of a running theme, because Kay has been doing this as well. So we're now on July the 26th, and Kay tweets, remember that? I'm not sure what she's responding to. Oh, hang on. I do know what she's responding to. Anyway, remember that? The 2011 Palliative Care Funding Review, the Lansley Report, page 54, end-of-life care is to be broadened and incentivized. Do look it up, folks. Now, get your head around everyone's an organ donor unless you walked out, and you cannot take an organ from a cadaver, a dead body. The best organ donors are under 30 with a beating heart, with a circulation ideally on a ventilator. Then take a look at the National Organ Retrieval Service. And she then puts a rainbow emoji and writes, the National Homicide Service, ? And a cult, ? Which really makes you think. And she's responding to this twat called Dr. Mohammed Adil. Do you know of Dr. Mohammed Adil?
Sure, I've recognized the name.
Yeah, he's one of these people that sort of tried to make a name for himself in the conspiracy world during COVID and ended up ruining his career. I believe it's actually a hip replacement doctor, or that's his specialization. And I actually had a bit of an interaction with Dr. Adil on some podcast that I was doing that sadly the host of which has since died. And so I don't think it exists anymore, but he was in the chat room shouting nonsensical stuff. And it was very early on during COVID. He really went down the don't take a vaccine if they're going to have a vaccine. And then latterly down the sort of COVID doesn't really exist. And if it did, it wasn't dangerous anyway. And, New World Order shit. And apparently one of his children is autistic. And I think the combination of I think he'd been reading a lot of stuff about anti-vax stuff, and the combination of this and COVID pushed him somewhat over the edge. But Dr. Adil tweets out, morphine used for slow deaths, the Liverpool care pathway during COVID pandemic, resulting in the deaths of thousands of elderly people. Midazolam and morphine used for slow deaths, Liverpool care pathway. Hospitals were bribed to put patients on a pathway to death during the COVID pandemic. And this is not true. This is this silly thing that we've talked about many times on various shows that we've done. The idea that a huge amount of sedatives were bought just prior to the COVID pandemic, and that is seemingly evidence of mass murder. And this originally came from a chap called Paul Palinko, who's a Catholic priest who has a very similar attitude to the Dr. Byrne that we were talking about. He has this idea that the soul inhabits a body, and he rose to certain prominence. There was a case where a young man, semi-estranged from his family, was on life support, and his wife or fiance wanted to turn the life support off, and Patrick Palinko, along with the poor man's family, petitioned the hospital to not turn off the life support because they felt that this was murder. that the soul was still there. It's a very stupid and complicated thing, and based on nonsense, essentially. And he was also found to have lied in certain court cases. But anyway, he started this idea, which was then stolen by Jackie Devoy, who took it to the Ikes, David Icke and Iconic, and made a film about it. And the idea is that basically the doctors and nurses were murdering people with this sedative. The reason that this sedative was bought en masse was because it's vital to have sedatives to help people not panic when they're on ventilators, particularly if they're in a deep state of illness that COVID would cause. And so that's why they bought lots of this, because they preempted that lots of people were going to be on ventilators. There's absolutely no evidence of an incentivized death pathway. There's no evidence that anybody was bribed. And nobody's come forward to say, yes, I was involved in this. Not a single one of the, let's face it, hundreds and thousands of doctors and nurses who would have had to be in on this, known what they were doing, and yet chose A, to do this, and B, their conscience didn't prick them afterwards in any slight way. It's utter bullshit. It's actually despicable, because what you're doing is, again, this is so common in the conspiracy world, under the guise of trying to find answers for people whose parents, loved ones, whatever, have died. What you're actually doing is you're exploiting those people, exploiting the deaths of those loved ones to give you a platform so that you can play hero, when you either know that you are lying and don't care, or are too stupid to be allowed to continue. And it's just despicable shit. And a lot of people disguise it as, I'm a good person, look at me, I'm like an activist, I'm doing stuff. You're not. You're doing it to benefit yourself, to feed into your own ego, to feed into this identity that you have about yourself. And you're exploiting the most vulnerable people. And there must be a degree of knowledge about that. The cognitive dissonance can't be there in all, and certainly not in all cases. And, you know, you're shit human beings. Anyway, speaking of shit human beings, Mohammed Adil was actually struck off, and this was the High Court judgment. The second group of allegations concerned matters that took place when Mr. Adil worked at the North Manchester Hospital NHS Trust. These allegations did not concern treatment given to any patient, but rather Miss Adil's appearance in videos published on YouTube between April 2020 and October 2020. The allegations were set out as follows in what has been referred to before me as the charge sheet, which the tribunal set out in the full body of its determination on the facts. Between April 2020 and October 2020, you appeared in videos that were uploaded to the video sharing platforms in which you said that A, the SARS-CoV-2 virus and or COVID-19 disease do not exist, or words to that effect. Approved judgment Adil versus the GMC. B, the COVID-19 pandemic is a conspiracy brought by the United Kingdom, Israel and America, or words to that effect. And C, the COVID-19 pandemic is a multi-billion scam which is being manipulated for the benefit of Bill Gates, pharmaceutical companies, the Johns Hopkins Medical Institute of Massachusetts, the World Health Organization, or words to that effect. And D, the COVID pandemic was being used to impose a new world order, or words to that effect. That the SARS-CoV virus was made as part of a wider global conspiracy, or words to that effect, that Bill Gates infected the entire world with SARS-CoV-2 in order to sell vaccines. Vaccines would be given to everyone by force if necessary, which could potentially contain microchips that affect the human body and further the 5G mobile phone technology. And this will transform human psychology and beliefs and could be used to control and or reduce the world's population, or words to that effect. 3. In the videos referred to in paragraph 2, you use your position as a doctor in the UK on one or more occasions to promote your opinion. Your actions are referred to at paragraph 2 undermined public health, were contrary to widely accepted medical opinion, or undermined public confidence in the medical profession. In May 2020, you said to your responsible officer, Professor B, that you had or would remove the videos referred to at paragraph 2 from video sharing platforms, or words to that effect. Further to discussions, you failed to remove the videos. You appeared in further videos which were uploaded to various different video sharing platforms, in which you made comments similar or the same to those referred to in paragraph 2. So this is the person that she's responding to and using the appeal to authority of the fact that he was a doctor. He now is not a doctor. And this was reported as well in the BBC News. Mr. Adil used his position as a doctor in the UK to promote his opinion, and his actions undermined public health and public confidence in the medical profession and were contrary to widely accepted medical opinion at the time. A tribunal in June 2022 suspended the surgeon for his online comments to give him the time to reflect on its findings, especially that he lacked the adequate understanding and appreciation of the impact of his actions. However, 5 months later, he tweeted, "COVID is only a flu virus. It has not killed people. People have been killed by lockdowns, fear created of dying, heart attacks, cancers, lung diseases, strokes, lack of medical facilities, dehydration, isolation, and depression due to financial hardship." He continued, "Not a single trial has proved efficacy of mRNA vaccines to be safe and effective. I knew this hoax before anyone else would have known it, and widely expressed my concerns widely across the world. Wouldn't be liked by the establishment of being smarter and more visionary than them, unleashing their plans before time." So yeah, not a great copywriter. He said of the mRNA vaccine, "It neither stopped transmission of the virus, treatment, or prophylaxis, as a vast scientific evidence proved. Rather, injuries and death are attributed to toxic deaths due to myocarditis, strokes, paralysis, and arrhythmias and deaths. Do you think that the coronavirus scam and lucrative business of the mRNA vaccine around the world population would be buried by the big lies of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and scientists of SAGE would be awarded to knighthood award like the one awarded to war criminal Tony Blair?" He's misspelt Tony. Never mind. Anyway, the long and short is that none of that is true. Not even close to being true. In fact, the opposite of everything that he said is true. But anyway, we remember.
I was thinking one thing about when he stumbled on COVID is nothing more than just another flu virus and hasn't killed anyone. This is what he said, right? And I was thinking, well, but the flu virus people.
Yes, quite. There is that flaw. And also, basically, he contradicts his position that the virus didn't exist. But, you know, like, again,
who's keeping track here? Who's keeping notes?
Exactly. No one. Like absolutely no one. So we remember that he was referring to page 54 of this report. Let me just find out again what the name of this particular report was. About how taking organs has been incentivized. It was the 2011 Palliative Care Funding Review, also known as the Lansley Report. And Kate says, page 54, go and have a look at it. So, you know, I went and had a look at page 54. And it doesn't, can you believe, appear to say anything like what she says. This is the entirety of page 54. Patients with terminal illnesses need to feel that they are achieving the most from their lives. These rehabilitation therapies support them to do this. It is an essential part of the funding. Social care stakeholders felt that social care plays a fundamental role in ensuring that patients can be cared for and die in the community setting, be it at their own homes or in care or nursing homes. Timely, effective social care is likely to provide cost savings to the system, as it will enable patients to be discharged more quickly from hospital, ensure that they are able to remain in their home, and prevent unnecessary admissions to hospital and or care homes. The emphasis on increased care in the community must make this a priority, and there needs to be an incentive to discourage inpatient admissions and encourage discharges. If affordable, this should be a priority for providing an acceptable level of quality of life. At the end of a patient's life, care, based on a needs assessment, should be available quickly and without a requirement for means testing or a continuing care assessment. If a patient is dying, meeting their needs should be the primary concern. Care homes are vital in caring for people approaching the end of life and should be supported to provide high quality palliative care and to enable patients to die there. Now, did you spot how there wasn't a single mention of organs?
I was waiting for one.
Well, this is the point. So either she's got the wrong page, or yet again, she's relied on people not going and checking what she said, and she's misrepresented it. At best, she's misrepresented it. At worst, she's lied. And this is beginning to be a pattern because she did this about heart movements. She did this about spinal movements. She seems to have done this about absolutely everything that she brings forward. So we're now on to July the 29th, and more details are sort of trickling out from the inquest. The Daily Mail reports under a headline, Cambridge graduate 23 was having 5 coffee enemas a day under her anti-vax mother's care after refusing chemotherapy for cancer, inquest told. A University of Cambridge graduate who died after refusing chemotherapy was having 5 coffee enemas a day under her mother's care, her brother has claimed. Dr. Ajaz spent 7 sessions with Paloma on the recommendation of her mother, Miss Shemirani, with whom he had a professional relationship, the inquest heard. The doctor had appeared on Miss Shemirani's podcast as a medical expert 3 times, and she had referred multiple patients to him. Previously, Dr. Ajaz provided an assessment of Paloma during High Court proceedings, which read, I have no concerns that Ms. Shemirani has been coerced or unduly influenced by any individual when making a decision about her own medical treatment. Although one could make the argument that, well, yes, but you are a friend of Kate Shemirani, so who can say? Anyway, Mr. Shemirani asserted that Dr. Ajaz's session with his sister were coloured by my mother's control, which Dr. Ajaz said was speculation. Dr. Ajaz added that it was not his job to comment on the efficacy of her devised treatment program. My sister was having coffee enemas daily. Would it worry you now if she had told you that? Asked Mr. Shemirani. I don't know anything about coffee enemas, said Dr. Ajaz. The inquest heard that Paloma's cancer treatment revolved largely around a strict diet of lots and lots of green juices, and she was to have 5 coffee enemas every day. Do you think that my mum might have been scaring Paloma and making her think that she was the only one who could save her? Asked Mr. Shemirani. I don't know. You could speculate for sure, said Dr. Ajaz. Miss Kay Shemirani, who attended the inquest via video link, was warned that her conduct was unacceptable as she raised signs whilst on mute and tried to introduce new allegations during her questioning of Dr. Ajaz. The coroner said, Miss Shemirani, your behaviour is becoming unacceptable again. You cannot sit in a courtroom and put up signs in front of the camera. It's bordering on contempt, Ms. Shemirani. It is bordering on contempt of court. And the London Standard released a story. Graduate who died after refusing chemo told the court that she was anti-vax. A University of Cambridge graduate who died after refusing chemotherapy told a court that she was anti-vax and always turned to her mother first for health advice, an inquest is heard. So just to clarify, this is Paloma saying that the anti-vax ideology is her own thought. Now, whether she's been influenced by her mother, of course she must have been influenced by her mother, but she still takes that as her own belief. This is something that she believes. In the same way, I suppose, that if somebody grew up in a Christian family but said that they, I still am faithful or whatever, that would be a sort of similar comparison. Another statement in Paloma's name added, my friends know me as a staunch advocate of Gerson therapy, and also that she is anti-vax. She said that she'd been using Gerson therapy as one mode of treatment on the advice of her mother's ex-fiancé, Dr. Patrick Villas, and that at 15 years old, she spent 3 weeks in his camp in Mexico where Gerson therapy was practiced. Ms. Shemirani cross-examined Dr. Amit Goul, a consultant histopathologist at Maidstone Hospital who carried out a biopsy. She repeatedly put it to him that insufficient tissue was taken to carry out a FISH test that could rule out other diseases and alter Paloma's treatment plan. But the doctor denied that this would have influenced Paloma's care multiple times, and the coroner told Ms. Shemirani the inquest is trying to look at how Paloma came about her death, but you are apparently trying to get information which is incorrect, factually incorrect, in the statements that you are making. I think your questions are just designed to take up time and delay matters by the way you're asking them repeatedly, the coroner added. At the opening of the hearing, Ms. Shemirani made an application for a lawyer to recuse herself. The coroner rejected the application and said had seen the hundreds of emails that have been sent in, and that you have requested that everybody recuse themselves at various times. including the coroner herself. So just to sort of pass a bit of that out, Kay is repeatedly telling her followers that there wasn't sufficient tissue taken from the biopsy. She also says that the histology, the blood work, was never done, which we'll come on to later. But this is the doctor that did the biopsy turning around and saying, no, that's not true. And no, it wouldn't have altered. What she's saying is that if you'd have looked for something, you'd have found out what the true cause of this was. And so you'd have treated it differently. And the doctor saying, well, no, that's absolutely not the case. We knew exactly what was the problem, and we were treating that. And then it's fairly obvious that Kay is trying to sort of muddy the waters by getting this idea into the court case, but it's just not true. The hundreds of emails refers to apparently a 200-page document that Kay provided to the court, which apparently bolstered her case that the NHS had murdered her daughter. This evidence was looked through and deemed to be irrelevant, completely irrelevant, because it just didn't hang together. It just simply didn't tie together. The Bicester Advertiser went with the story. Brother of a woman who refused chemotherapy says mother sacrificed her daughter. The brother of a woman who died after refusing chemotherapy told an inquest his conspiracy theorist mother sacrificed his sister for her own principles by advising her not to seek treatment. Paloma's twin brother, Gabriel Shemirani, told the inquest at Kate and Medway Coroner's Court in Maidstone, I blame my mother entirely for my sister's death by obstructing his sister from receiving treatment. In short, I believe that she sacrificed Paloma's life for her own principles. I believe that she should be held accountable for Paloma's death. Mr. Shemirani's parents split in 2014 after a relationship which had involved domestic abuse both ways, he told the court. He alleged that he and his siblings felt unsafe around their mother and that she had been emotionally distant and physically abusive to both of them as children. He further alleged during his evidence that his father, Dr. Paloma Shemirani, was also physically abusive to him and his brother. At the time of Paloma's cancer diagnosis in autumn 2023, she was estranged from her mother, who then advised her against conventional medicine, the court heard. In my opinion, Kay Shemirani directed her resentment that she held towards my other siblings and I towards Paloma. Mr. Shemirani said, Paloma had a complicated relationship with our mother. Maybe it's because she had a complicated relationship that she decided to rekindle that relationship when she became ill. He claimed that when Paloma was first diagnosed, she was considering chemotherapy before their parents started to pressure her against it. Her father sent a message to his daughter saying, don't consent to anything from the doctors, they will try and kill you. And that Miss Shemirani had texted, I am the only one that can help you. Don't bite the hand that feeds. There was no disagreement from her that this was cancer. She never expressed to me that she never expressed it to the doctors either, said Mr. Shemirani, that's Gabriel. My sister didn't die from stress from the court case, which is what Kay has claimed. Also, she's claimed that she was murdered. Also, she claimed that she choked on food. It's not entirely clear. My sister died from cancer. I think that's clear, said Mr. Shemirani. Before the High Court case, Mr. Shemirani also referred to a situation to social services, but he felt that they were slow moving, the court heard. He added that his younger sister had been taken away from their mother when she was 16, and the case was only driven by my love and concern for my twin sister. Dr. Shemirani had claimed that his son was irrational and an unreliable witness, and that his actions had been a major contributing factor to her death. This is not a public forum to air grievances, the coroner, Catherine Wood, said. I don't have any grievances. I don't have any, Dr. Shemirani said. It sounds like it, Gabriel responded. When his questions concluded, Dr. Shemirani said, finally may our Lord Almighty exorcise you from the demons that possess you. Amen. On Wednesday afternoon, Mr. Shemirani told the court that his sister was terrified of cancer, but used gallows humor as a defense mechanism. Are you a psychologist, Gabriel? His mother asked him during the court appearance, to which he responded, are you a nurse? Don DeMarco. Anyway, just a few things there. So it wasn't just Kay that contacted Paloma in the hospital. It was also her father who has said, no bones about it. Don't listen to the doctors. The NHS is trying to kill you. And then the mother explicitly said, sorry, I'm the only one that can help you. Like that's
a bit much, isn't it? Like,
it,
wow.
it's horrific. And then during the actual court case for the father, Dr. Shemirani, to try and blame it on Gabriel and still continue with this. Oh, it was the stress of the ongoing court case, but then to do the whole, they Quasimodo it, don't they? Like, oh, there's demons inside you. May Lord God.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put a pin in that. I'm the only one who can help you. Let's put a pin in that, because I think that's going to come up.
Yeah,
to be very important later.
I suspect that will be like. Anyway, the ITV News Meridian, they went with osteopath treating woman who refused chemo, advised medical help, inquest hears. And so you remember that Kay had said that Paloma was in sort of rude health. She was doing really well, looked exactly the same despite being hugely underweight. She showed that photo, which I think has got a very swollen face in comparison to previous pictures. Like I was shocked when she showed that picture. I thought that you can clearly see there's been a change of some sort. But she said that she went shopping, she went to an osteopath, and everything was like hunky dory. The osteopath remembers this differently, and this was reported, as I say, in the ITV News Meridian. An osteopath who treated a young woman who refused cancer treatment knew he was not the right person to be helping her and was horrified to hear of her death, an inquest heard. On Wednesday, osteopath Nick Gossett, who saw Paloma on July the 19th, 2024, the day that she collapsed and was taken to hospital by air ambulance, advised her to seek further medical support, the inquest at Kent Medway Coroner's Court in Maidstone heard. He said that when he inspected her, he could feel lumps in her right shoulder going all the way up into her neck, which he identified as lymphoid mass, and that he had, and I quote, never seen anything like it in 43 years of practice. Mr. Gossett told the court, it was obvious to me that I was not the right person to be helping her. Normally you see a patient like that, you would refer her to a GP, but any referral was refused. When I suggested that the proper avenue of approach was through a normal medical channel, she dismissed it. I felt I was presented with a young woman, and I'm not an expert in this, my field is biomechanics, but a young lady who was in the last stages of a very difficult disease, and she had declined to engage with conventional treatment. And he added that he'd felt aggrieved that he'd been put in that professional position. I was left with no good choices, and the only choice I felt I had at the time was to offer her the opportunity to return, where I might be able to persuade her of the importance of seeking further medical support. So he's decided he wants to try and convince her to go to a hospital or a GP because he can physically see and feel a mass, which is the tumor from the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, sticking out of her chest, neck, and shoulders. He could physically see and feel it. When he was asked about how he felt, he was told of how he felt when he was told of Paloma's death. He said, "I was horrified," before clarifying that he was surprised by the rapidity, but not by her death. I was well aware that she was extremely ill. I did not feel that she needed immediate medical support. Yesterday, Paloma's GP told the court that conditions were in place that if Paloma felt any change in her condition, including shortness of breath, she would seek conventional medical attention. Mr. Gossett told the coroner that Ms. Shemirani was exhibiting those symptoms on the day he saw her. He said, "May I observe that in the evidence of the GP yesterday that there was a clear understanding made that should Paloma's situation deteriorate, and that included any shortness of breath, that there would be an immediate response to the call of the emergency services or present to A&E. And he added that she came to me with such a changing situation. I have to say that I'm deeply aggrieved that you should put me in that professional position." And that is again the osteopath who cleared it. So it appears that the GP that we've been talking about is Dr. Aziz. Now there is a contradiction in there as well, because it's like, well, why is he suggesting that she would, like, she's got trouble breathing or anything like that? I thought she was getting better, and I also thought that she didn't have cancer, which again. So why are you doing Gerson therapy and hyperbaric oxygen therapy? It's very confused, this. Now, Dr. Aziz has got a website. And there's an article on Dr. Aziz's website called "The Evolution of Psychiatry is Here." So I'm just going to read you this. This is the person that K. Shemirani recommends. Conventional psychiatry is languishing in the dark age of relying on decades-old drugs and indescript psychotherapies. In the meantime, science has made major leaps to recognize the importance of the gut-brain axis, non-invasive therapies, and neurotechnology to defeat mental illness. Poor brain health underpins every mental illness, including depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, ADHD, addiction, PTSD, schizophrenia, OCD, and dementia. Improving your brain health is the key to defeating your mental health problems for good. This approach empowers you to take control of your health and life. I'm committed to helping you reach your best health by identifying the unique and underlying root causes of mental health problems. Conventional medicine often focuses on naming diseases and using a pill for every diagnosis. I take a different approach. Functional medicine views the body as one integrated system, and the treatment is therefore holistic, not just the symptoms alone.
I was so hoping it was going to be something to do with archons.
Well, I mean, it might as fucking well be. Like, what they're talking about is this is woo shit. This is holistic. Your gut drives your mental health. The language used there is appalling. We will help you defeat your mental health problems. And to lump
There is
all those
no disease. It is dis-ease.
Yeah, it's all that shit. Like it's totally that we can give you regimes that will treat this. Let's have a look at some of the things that he thinks can be treated by improving essentially your gut brain access, which usually involves eating lots of yogurt. So, what can be cured by eating lots of yogurt? Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, ADHD, PTSD, schizophrenia, dementia. I'm not convinced, I'll be honest. It sounds like a lot of woo shit to me, basically, because it is. So anyway, the inquest is ongoing, and Will Coleshaw from GB Resistance is outside the hearing again, trying to make it all about him. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just come back from the Paloma Shemirani inquest, where obviously the BBC have tried to pin her daughter's death on her, or at least framed it in that fashion. There has been a lot coming out there. There are some huge bombshells. We'll see statements read out in court, but there will be big reports of interviews coming out where I'll be laying all this out. But I wanted to highlight something very interesting that happened today. One first thing that was dealt with in court was allegedly I was filming in the press room while sat right at the front of a camera all day yesterday. So apparently somehow I was filming in this press room whilst there was a mainstream media and BBC and everyone else. And it's quite funny because you're not allowed to film in court. I've been reporting on court cases for about 4.5 years now and never filmed or published anything from court. Nothing's been published online, which is very interesting because if I were to be banned from the court, then the entire alternative media present would be gone. So I believe that this is a malicious allegation which has been made in order to try and bar me from covering this case, being as I'm literally the only person here covering it, who's not for the mainstream, so far as I know. In other news, when I walked into court this morning, Gabriel Shemirani was giving me such a death stare. On the first day, he turned around and he beamed at me. He absolutely beamed at me. Much more to come. So, let's again unpack that for a bit. Will Coleshaw blatantly got caught trying to film something in court on his phone, didn't he? And
yeah.
And so he does a very, very sort of, I never did that. I've never done that. In fact, I can prove that I've never done that because you'll never find any legally filmed stuff that I've done on the internet. And then whines that he's not being treated in the same regard as the British Broadcasting Corporation. Then he goes on with his delusions of grandeur by saying that he's the one light of truth, the one last bastion of honesty, the only representative of the alternative media that's bothered to cover the case, which I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it really doesn't matter because he is, to use a word, shit So it really doesn't matter. Anyway, Kate is panicking. On Twitter, she tweets out, I just read a report. Well, actually, you can tell that she's panicking. So I'm going to read out exactly what she's tweeted.
Before you do, I also want to point out the very last bit that he said there is to try and make like the boys look menacing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when like their anger is valid.
Absolutely.
I could understand why any of them would want to punch the shit out of someone who was backing their mother.
Yeah,
who was
absolutely.
Denying their emotions, their what they've gone through, their experience, the fact that their sister has been killed by this cult-like belief system that they escaped.
Absolutely, and not
like,
only that,
fuck's
but
sake,
yeah, it's horrific, isn't it? And not only that, but like there's the very real point that Will Coleshaw, you're not doing this for the truth. You're doing this because you think you can get something off the back of this. You can get it with clout.
You're doing this for clicks.
Yeah, precisely.
The boys aren't. They're doing this for justice. They're doing this for their sister. Like, it really annoys me.
Mind-boggling, isn't it?
It is. Fuck back. Step the fuck back. And go away, because this is real people shit right now. Like, in your stupid fucking clicks on Twitter, on Rumble, on whatever the fuck you're on. Fuck off.
Well, this is the point. It is something real, but they've turned it into one of these, like, you know, again, this hero's journey. Look at us fighting.
Even Kay.
Yeah.
Even
Absolutely.
Kay's doing it. It's disgusting.
Well, it's, you know, to an extent, there must be a degree of how else would you cope? The mental gymnastics required in this, you're either the villain or you're the hero. And, you know, so they've chosen the hero. But it seems that she's panicking, because I'll read out exactly what she tweets. I just read a report from the ITV. Either their reports or death, their shorthand was terrible, or they just could not keep up. I tell everyone now to go back to my daughter's statement. It is on Twitter, my feed. It is on my thread at ITV. So I think what she's trying to say, ironically, is I think the reporter's shorthand was terrible, or they could not keep up, but she's garbled it. But, you know, we'll skip past the massive irony of that.
It was so meta. She knew what she was doing.
Yeah, she knew what she was doing. So on July the 31st, the ITV News Meridian goes with the story. Mother of Sussex woman who died after refusing chemo says her anti-vaccine views are not to blame. The mother of a young woman from Uckfield who decided not to proceed with NHS cancer care has told an inquest that she isn't to blame for her daughter's death, but the health service is. Kate Shemirani, who was struck off as a nurse for promoting anti-vaccine views during the pandemic, said she did not influence Paloma Shemirani's decision to explore natural therapies. Right. I mean, the two text messages alone prove that to be not accurate. Paloma, 23, collapsed on July the 19th last year and was taken to Royal Sussex Hospital, where she died 5 days later, having earlier declined treatment for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Her mother, Kate K. Shemirani, who rose to prominence on social media while sharing COVID-19 conspiracy theories, said her daughter deteriorated catastrophically when paramedics intervened. Miss Shemirani, who was involved in Paloma's alternative treatment, called her friend before calling an ambulance the day her daughter collapsed. The inquest at Kent and Medway's Coroner Court in Maidstone heard. On Wednesday, reading a prepared witness statement, she accused the inquest of attempting to shift focus from the real cause of Paloma's death. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever read any Freud or psychology or anything like that, but that's quite telling. But anyway, it's called projection. Any attempt to place responsibility on me is false. The people who need to be answering are those who failed to confirm diagnosis, administered drugs without her consent, which would have damaged her heart. On the day she collapsed, she had an appointment with an osteopath, Nick Gossett, who described her on Wednesday as a young lady who was at the last stages of a very difficult disease. Today, her mother disagreed, saying, on the morning of July the 19th, Paloma was well. She looks healthy and good colour. She was smiling and laughing. She was not as described yesterday by the osteopath. Paloma collapsed at home later that day, and her mother called a friend, who then called an ambulance whilst they initiated CPR. On the 999 call played to the court, Miss Shemirani was heard shouting, she's dying to the operator before the paramedics arrived. Right. I mean, that goes against what Kate has said. And it also, we've said this previously, why did you call paramedics if you didn't feel that it was necessary for paramedics to be there? Why were you having to resuscitate your daughter? Anyway, she told the ambulance operator it's difficult to lie her on her front because she has a medicinal mass in her throat, the inquest heard. So we know that Kate was acknowledging that there was something there. In her evidence, Ms. Shemirani told the court that when the paramedics arrived, they administered adrenaline, then everything went horribly wrong. Following their intervention, her daughter went into full circulatory collapse. I knew at this point that they'd done something, giving her something that had caused this. Ms. Shemirani added she deteriorated catastrophically upon their arrival and their intervention. So on August the 5th, Nursing Times goes with the story, Woman's Death Sparks Fresh Warning Over Misuse of Nurse Title. The article goes to say, the death of a woman who declined cancer treatment, allegedly on the advice of her mother, a conspiracy theorist and former nurse, is proof of the need to legally protect the title nurse, according to campaigners. Paloma Shemirani, who had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, died last July, aged 23, after suffering a heart attack, which was understood to have been caused by the tumour. An inquest into her death remains ongoing. Speaking to Nursing Times following the broadcast of the BBC programme, Ms. Shemirani, who cut ties with his mother 9 years ago, said she sees herself as a conduit of truth, and that her former professional title, which she sometimes still uses, gives her a false air of authority. Mr. Shemirani described the environment in which he and his siblings grew up in as a cult. He said that Paloma was not in the frame of mind to make an unbiased decision about her cancer treatment. This, he said, was because Paloma, unlike himself and another of their siblings, continued to have a relationship with Ms. Shemirani and be influenced by her. You cannot make an informed decision to reject chemotherapy that has an 80% 5-year survival rate over something that is untested and is basically the same as doing nothing. The fact that Paloma made this decision is evidence that she wasn't in a decision-making mindset. You cannot make an informed decision, for example, to kill yourself in most circumstances. A 23-year-old cannot make an informed decision to reject chemotherapy because, by definition, that's not informed. By definition, something is wrong. The campaign to protect the title of nurse, led by Professor Alison Leary and Paul Travat, found some success earlier this year when the UK government announced it would be reforming regulation to make it a criminal offence for a person to call themselves a nurse without being on the NMC register. However, the rules have not yet changed. As a result, it remains legal for anyone to use the title until the regulatory reform comes into effect. Mr. Shemirani said that the sense of authority his mother's former title provides makes it harder to reject the misinformation she gives. The fact that she calls herself a nurse and once called herself a nurse officially makes it harder to reject the information because part of her selling point is that she's been an insider and now she's bringing the truth. The mass majority of her followers are not healthcare professionals, so they have to take what she says. And you see this with a lot of these conspiracy theorists. We love a contrarian. We love an underdog in our media and in our stories. Mr. Shemirani said that falsely claiming to be a doctor or nurse without the proper qualifications and regulatory oversight was inherently putting people's lives at risk. And also, various other people that we spoke about in this sad saga, Cartland and Adil, they both used the title doctor despite the fact that they were both, struck off in disgrace because they're terrible, dreadful people. August the 11th, the BBC News said that Kate Shemirani arranged alternative cancer care for her daughter. A high-profile conspiracy theorist whose daughter died from cancer after refusing chemotherapy organised her care when she left hospital, an inquest is heard. Paloma Shemirani from Uckfield in East Sussex died last year, 7 months after receiving a cancer diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. On Monday, the inquest into Maidstone into Paloma's death heard from her mother, Kate Shemirani, a former nurse who was struck off for spreading anti-medicine COVID-19 misinformation. Ms. Shemirani denies influencing her daughter's decision to refuse chemotherapy, saying, "It doesn't matter what my view was, it was what Paloma wanted to do." We must remember that she tried to take power of attorney. So this is, I think, disingenuous. The inquest has played a voice note from Miss Shemirani to her daughter's boyfriend where she told him to put Paloma in a wheelchair and take her down to the car. The voice note was sent 2 or 3 days after Paloma had been diagnosed with cancer at Maidstone Hospital. Mr. Shemirani told him to listen to her message in private and away from Paloma's ears, and that he had to drive Paloma away very carefully without braking sharply. On Monday, she said that she would need the forensic data before agreeing that the voice note heard by the court was from her. But she added that whoever left the message gave fantastic advice. And this is the thing as well, is like, this is cowardice, right? Either you believe in the shit you are saying or you're trying to weasel out of it. If you're trying to weasel out of it, why are you trying to weasel out of it? It doesn't make any sense. None of this hangs together. She said that she'd not wanted Paloma to hear this message because she would have been frightened and that she could have been injured if her boyfriend drove too fast. When asked about her views on chemotherapy, Ms. Shemirani said, "Why is this about me and my opinions? Is it a witch hunt?" And the simple answer to that is because this is an inquest to see if whether you were responsible for your daughter's death, and you know this, and the fact that you're sidestepping it rather than just giving your views on chemotherapy, which are apparently valid and wouldn't matter anyway, because it was never, according to her, proved that Paloma had cancer, despite the fact that they were doing an alternative cancer therapy. None of this makes any sense. She told the court that she'd asked for Paloma to have all the medical notes and results so that she could have all the facts and get a second opinion from doctors they knew in Iran and Mexico. That would be Patrick Vickers and Paloma's father. Ms. Shemirani said that she did not know if the records were ever sent to another oncologist, hematologist for a second opinion because they were Paloma's records, and that she was 22, an adult. So hang on, so you don't even so we don't even know if your ex-husband and your business partner and former lover gave any advice. You don't know if they gave any advice to your daughter or if they received her medical notes. Okay. Alison Hewitt, counsel at the inquest, asked Ms. Shemirani, is it the case? It is the case, isn't it, that you have expressed publicly views which are contrary to chemotherapy? You consider chemotherapy as a dangerous and toxic process and one that wouldn't advise someone suffering cancer undergoes. Ms. Shemirani branded the question slanderous and not true, adding, in all my public appearances, I say people should get all the information and then decide. But when she was pushed on whether she had described chemotherapy as mustard gas, she replied, this is not relevant. You're making slanderous accusations. People should be able to choose. And the reason is because she absolutely has referred to chemotherapy as not effective, that it will kill you, and that it was derived from mustard gas and is the equivalent of taking mustard gas. Now, it is true, actually, that chemotherapy was devised from mustard gas. But to say that having chemotherapy is like being blasted in the trenches of the First World War is not even close to accurate. Like it's ridiculous. That's like saying that penicillin is equivalent to shoving your face in the mold of a dying animal or a fungus. Like, do you know what I mean? Because it comes from fungus and molds and spores and stuff like that. Like it's the equivalent of saying that a cake is an egg. It's really as silly as that, but it sounds scary. On August the 12th, Sebastian Shemirani tweets, what angers me most is she says, do your own research as a disclaimer when she sells people lies that can kill them. That's not how it works. Yep. You call yourself a nurse and get vulnerable people to trust you. We know your tricks, you fucking monster.
Yeah,
On the
I
same,
caught the do your own research bit. Kind of, oh, I'm just presenting the evidence. Like there's
just,
that whole David Icke thing. I'm just presenting the
just asking
information.
questions, which is bullshit.
You go and find out what you think the truth is.
No,
Like,
fuck that. Take responsibility for your actions. That's a coward's way out, and a pathetic, mealy-mouthed scumbag's option. Oh, I'm going to ask all these questions. I'm going to put this, and then if anyone challenges me, I'm going to say, well, I'm just asking questions, or well, I'm not an expert, or something like that, or I'm just trying to get the truth out there. I'm just trying to start a conversation. No, you're fucking not.
yeah.
No, you're
I know
not.
they can say, I said it before. I've said it before. Go check me out. You
Yeah.
know?
It's just it's juvenile. It's children's tactics. Basically, it's. I know you are, but what am I? It's literally that type of shit, and it's just again the thing that gets me, that should be a massive warning to all her followers, is that she doesn't stick by her own internal principles, the principles that she's set up to designate herself as truthful and honest and righteous and on this path. She won't even go, yes, that is what I believe. This is what I believe, and that is why I did it. Like, so how can you trust this person? On the same day, LBC printed an article. Parents who advised daughter against chemotherapy warned over inquest behaviour. The parents of the Cambridge graduate who refused chemotherapy after being diagnosed with cancer have been warned about their behaviour in court during an inquest into her death. Coroner Catherine Wood, presiding over the inquest, left the court due to the behaviour of Ms. Shemirani's parents on Tuesday afternoon. The inquest, which was originally scheduled to conclude on Wednesday, has been extended as the evidence and questioning of witnesses has taken longer than anticipated. This is because Kate kept shouting and having to have a microphone turned off, and then trying to write on pieces of paper and show slogans. And she's admonished by the court several times. Questioning broke down when Dr. Shemirani, on Tuesday, Ms. Shemirani, who was struck off as a nurse in 2021, was cross-examined by Dr. Shemirani, who's a former husband. Questioning broke down when Dr. Shemirani, is understood to have a PhD in computational fluid dynamics, tried to ask his ex-wife's opinion of medical evidence, which she would then try to answer despite warnings from the coroner. So it transpires that Dr. Shemirani in his clinic in Iran has got a doctorate in computational fluid dynamics. So what his advice on treating cancer would be is irrelevant, to be honest. But it sounds like they're working together as a team. So they're trying to get certain things introduced into the case so that they can say this was brought up in court and they had no answer to it, which is, again, an obvious and shifty tactic. The coroner said, Ms. Shemirani, I've told you not to speak. I'll find you in contempt if you keep on speaking. Confine yourselves to asking questions of this witness as a witness of fact. As Dr. Shemirani argued back through his video link, the coroner said, Dr. Shemirani, challenge me by judicial review later before trying to move on. Of course I will. Of course I will, he replied. That would be interesting. Later, Dr. Shemirani once again tried to ask questions which had already been ruled irrelevant by the coroner. I'm going to rise for a few minutes because I'm finding it incredibly difficult to keep you on track, said Miss Wood. Dr. Shemirani continued to speak until the coroner was forced to shout at him and say, Dr. Shemirani, listen, your behavior has been bordering on contemptuous to the court. When I make a ruling on something, you cannot come back. Mrs. Shemirani, Kay, had also accused the osteopath Nick Gossett of being a liar and said that he had lied under oath and that he should be held accountable for this. So both of them are acting shamefully, like in the sort of way where normal human adults would be appalled and just mortified by the fact that you're trying something really, really pathetic and obvious, right? Okay. You could, like, there's a way that they're not malicious, that they're absolutely stupid, which is that they've watched, say, courtroom dramas, like, A Few Good Men or stuff like that. And they think that you can shout evidence into play, and everyone goes, yeah, no, wicked. Like, this is court. This isn't a rap battle. It's not how it works. So, and then just having a go at the poor osteopath who basically did absolutely nothing. She said his statement under oath is completely opposed with the truth. And she argued that her daughter was completely healthy on the day that she collapsed, which even as a sentence doesn't make any sense. But like, let's go on. Excuse me. On August the 13th, Gabriel tweeted out, "Just for case followers, your own natural nurse said yesterday at the coroner's inquest that she couldn't confirm whether the Gerson therapy cured cancer. This is despicable that she'll market it to the vulnerable as a cure, yet will plead the fifth under oath." That is appalling. That when pressed, she won't say it. Now, you could use the argument of, yeah, but it's illegal to say that you can cure cancer. So she's just covering her back legally, isn't she? It's like, well, okay, that's fine, but you're still a coward. You still don't think that your views, which apparently you think are truthful enough to stand up for yourself. You don't have any principles. So that's the one way that you could get out of this, by saying that basically, yeah, I'll say anything to anyone at any given time to save my own skin. The BBC on the same day printed an article saying, "Mum kept interrupting paramedics, saving daughter." That's a hell of a headline. Mum kept interrupting paramedics, saving daughter. Wow. The mother of a woman who died after refusing chemotherapy for cancer presented a challenge to paramedics trying to save her daughter's life after she suffered a heart attack, the inquest heard. Her mother, Kate Shemirani, Paloma talks about Paloma. This is her mother, Kate Shemirani, a former nurse who rose to prominence on social media, calls chemotherapy toxic and dangerous. When Paloma collapsed at her mother's home, paramedic Robin Bass said that Kate presented a challenge as she kept interrupting while crews were carrying out care. The paramedic told the coroner that Kate had mentioned a mass on her daughter's chest. But when Mr. Bass told colleagues that it could be cancer, he said that Kate denied that this was the case. Paloma's mother, who was struck off as a nurse for promoting misinformation about the pandemic, insisted that Paloma had choked on food. But the Royal Sussex County Hospital in Brighton determined that she'd died of or suffered a heart attack caused by a massive tumour. Dr. Peter Anderson, who saw her when paramedics brought her into the hospital, told the inquest that a large mass in her chest and neck, which was compressing her airways and affecting major blood vessels, could have caused the cardiac arrest. A safeguarding report was later requested over concerns about Paloma's refusal of cancer treatment and the possible influence of her mother. Mr. Bass said, "I believe we had to be firm, quite firm at some points. We had to ask for quiet while administering care to your sister." And this is when he's being questioned by Gabriel. Paloma's brother Gabriel asked another paramedic who treated Paloma at the inquest if his mum's delay in calling an ambulance affected her chance of survival. "It's difficult to say," said Karen Clark, a critical care paramedic. "You always recommend someone calling 999 straight away." Gabriel asked Miss Clark if she would have called a friend first, but she replied that she would have, of course, phoned an ambulance first. On August the 14th, Sebastian Shemirani tweets out a short takedown of Will Coleshaw. And he tweets out, "This is a short takedown of Will Coleshaw, the loser that is supporting the conspiracy theory influencers who killed my sister. He calls himself a journalist at his own company, GB Resistance. Despite being barely literate, unable to pronounce my surname, Will's real name is Congo Ray Salamat. His father is from the Dominican Republic and abandoned him and his mother. Will grew up with his nan and apparently still lives off of her. He changed his name to sound more English. Will's dad, Emmanuel, was deported from the UK twice, the second time for being convicted and jailed for child sex offences. Yep, you read that right. This darling of the so-called resistance literally has an immigrant rapist for a father. What a punchline. I guess your parents are as bad as mine, Will. Will's first real job was as a Tory councillor, but he was kicked out shortly after starting for racism. Desperate for cash, he then used COVID to grow his platform. All of this is online for people to verify: The Sun, The Guardian, The Enfield Observer, etc. He's a talentless, uneducated, and broke. Will now claims he's being framed for contempt of court in tough guy videos like the one below. In reality, he can't look my brother Gabriel in the eye during the proceedings. Admittedly, my little bro is a healthy 6'8" and over 210 pounds, so Will is making a very good decision for once. I also have it on good authority that Will absolutely stinks. I need everyone to understand these losers don't care whether what they say is true. They become conspiracy theory influencers to make money because they have no other options. They are controversy merchants, liars, shit stirrers and frauds, and they should be physically removed from civil society. Yeah.
Fuck.
Absolutely. So on August the 15th, Gabriel tweets out, inquest update. Coroner's conclusion has provisionally been set for release on the 3rd of September. Watch this space. And on August the 19th, Kate Shemirani tweets out, Coroner Wood, during the most recent day of the cover-up, oops, I meant inquest, at a giant cost to the Kent taxpayer of our daughter Paloma, who lived, received treatment, and had her life terminated in Sussex by the state. In her ending soliloquy, something along the lines are, the press are there to protect the public. On August the 27th, the BBC released more details from the inquest. The title, or the headline is, Paloma Shemirani Inquest, I saw her tumour growing in all directions. A pathologist has said that the obvious cause of death of a 23-year-old woman who refused chemotherapy was a mass in her chest and neck, so large that it was visible externally. At an inquest into her death at Medway Coroner's Court, Dr. David Wright said Paloma had a large mass as big as 17 centimetres or 6.7 inches in her chest. I looked at the tumour and you could see the bulk of it growing in all directions. The tumour had distorted and displaced veins and arteries and caused a major compromise of vessels and airways, Dr. Wright added. It was growing into the ribs. It had replaced most of the upper lobe of the right lung. The inquest heard earlier that Paloma had died after suffering a heart attack, which one doctor said could have been caused by the large mass compressing her airways and affecting major blood vessels. Asked by Kate Shemirani whether he had looked at alternative causes of death, including potentially latent tuberculosis, Dr. Wright said, this is a nonsensical question. It doesn't have any medical meaning. This is just word association. The untreated lymphoma was the obvious cause of death. If it had been tuberculosis, there would have been other symptoms present. There were no other symptoms present. So the pathologist, this tumor was massive, absolutely massive. Like that's horrific.
It was just allowed to grow.
Yeah.
Continue growing.
Until it just got in the way and essentially caused her to choke, which caused her to have a heart attack.
Fuck it.
It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. The BBC went on to say, a high-profile conspiracy theorist influenced her daughter to reject chemotherapy in favour of alternative treatments, which ultimately led to her death, a coroner has ruled. Ms. Shemirani declined chemotherapy in favour of juices and coffee enemas and advocated for by her mother, Kate Shemirani, a former nurse. Coroner Kate Wood said at the inquest on Thursday, the influence that was brought to bear on Paloma did contribute more than minimally to her death. The Cambridge graduate had initially consented to treatment, the coroner said, adding that doubts about consent surfaced only after Ms. Shemirani had become involved. The coroner said Ms. Shemirani was influenced by her own beliefs, her mother's, her father's, and by those of a family friend, all who advocated the alternative treatment she used. I found Ms. Shemirani's care of her daughter incomprehensible, but not an unlawful killing, Miss Wood said. It seems that if Paloma had been supported and encouraged to accept her diagnosis and considered chemotherapy with an open mind, she probably would have followed that course. So we've got the more instances of coming out, and the coroner has said that Kay Shemirani's advice contributed more than minimally to her own daughter's death, but that she didn't feel that it crossed the threshold of an unlawful killing because of the influence of several other people. We'll talk about this more, but the Independent says her mother questioned medical staff to the extent that the coroner found it highly likely that she seeded some form of doubt in Paloma's mind as to her diagnosis. Her father sent a message to his daughter saying, "Don't consent to anything from the doctors, they will try and kill you." And that Miss Shemirani had said, "I am the only one that can help you. Don't bite the hand that feeds." In other messages, her father insisted that she discharge herself and refuse any medication, and to urgently confirm that she'd done so, with Paloma responding, this is to her father, who's advising her not to take medical advice from the NHS because they will kill her. "Jesus Christ, you can both calm down. I get it. You're heckling me." The coroner also criticised Kate and her ex-husband's appalling behaviour in court, said these utterly groundless assertions to the cause of death and unfounded allegations in relation to the steps taken by others in trying to treat their daughter have been reprehensible. The inquest concluded that Paloma died of hyperoxic ischemic brain injury as a result of cardiac arrest as a consequence of her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So, sorry to dwell on this, but the mass in her chest caused her to not be able to breathe. When she was unable to breathe, she went into a cardiac arrest, had a heart attack. She then was left unconscious for such time that her brain was irreparably damaged. The adrenaline that was given to her by the paramedics brought her back to life, at which point she was put on life support, but she wasn't put on life support. She did have catastrophic brain damage, which later led to her death. But this wasn't caused by the adrenaline. This was probably caused by the lack of oxygen to her brain for so long. The coroner said that her parents, Kay and Paloma Shemirani, more than minimally contributed to her death. She said Kay Shemirani took a leading role in advising Paloma in respect of and facilitating access to alternative treatments. If approached with an open mind, Paloma would have chosen the chance to survive. And if she had undergone chemotherapy, she probably would have survived. So I managed to get a hold of the coroner's report, and it's horrible. This is like a few weeks prior to her death. On the 1st of July, and remember she collapsed on the 19th and ultimately died on the 24th. On the 1st of July, Paloma reported that she was really struggling with getting food down. She wrote, "I have a massive lymph node or something pressing on my throat, so the food keeps getting stuck. It slows down meal times and can often put me into a panic because I can't breathe." She was not wanting to eat and deal with the trauma of meal times. Because of the lump or node in her throat, she struggled to breathe, and this could bring on anxiety attacks while she was doing enemas. Her energy levels were low because she had not been sleeping well. Her weight was 40 kilograms, and she had lost 1.5 kilograms. Mentally, she was at her wit's end. The stress of the ongoing court case, she said, had been terrible. And she said she was having anxiety and panic attacks daily and that they were very traumatic. She also said that she'd suffered lots and lots of mucus while she breathed, which was in her lungs and it had worsened her breathing. And she wrote that there's clear, milky white, this mucus, and it comes out whenever I cough. And she was using a colloidal silver nebulizer to try and treat this. Colloidal silver has been pitted as a cure for everything from the common cold to cancer. All it really does is turn your skin blue and poison you if you use too much. She said that there was constant pain on the mass site and the very swollen lymph nodes in her throat. That's horrible. That's horrible. This poor girl is having panic attacks every time she tries to eat because there's something so big in her throat that it's choking her and making it difficult for her to breathe. This is 19 days before she collapsed. Kate denied being aware of Paloma having any difficulties eating or breathing. She was asked about a photo of Paloma on the 13th of July in which she can be receiving oxygen via a mask. Okay, so on the 13th, she can't breathe. But Kate says, oh no, it's nothing to do with that. You've misunderstood why we use oxygen masks. This is not because of breathing difficulties. This is something we both do. We receive pure oxygen as a health kick. I don't believe her. She's lied and misrepresented absolutely everything that she presented from the beginning of her career through to why she was struck off, through to everything about COVID, through to everything about organ retrieval. In July, Paloma texted her sister saying that Kate was saying, she's telling me my bloods aren't good and that at this rate, I'll die. Now, something very interesting came out in the inquest as well. On the day that she collapsed, Paloma collapsed just after a handyman had left the house at approximately 5:30. Kate phoned her friend, Katrine Leonette. Do you know what time she phoned her friend? 6 o'clock. She waited 30 minutes before phoning her friend after Paloma had collapsed, according to Kate, because she thought she was choking on food. Now, when her friend arrived, she made a phone call 4 minutes after arriving. So, a 999 call made by Miss Leonette is recorded on ambulance documentation as starting at 18:04 hours. A recording of the call was played. Miss Leonette speaks to the call handler initially, but Miss Shemirani immediately calls out to say that Paloma's breathing was laboured and that she had a mediastinal mass pressing on her airway. So she's acknowledged that it's not choking on food. She then says that she stopped breathing and she can be heard calling Paloma's name over and over again. Ms. Shemirani then stated to the call handler that she could not lie Paloma on her back because of the mass putting pressure on her airway. Ms. Shemirani can then be heard saying a prayer, but then saying that she's performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation with oxygen being delivered through a guidal airway in place. So she's pumping on Paloma's chest because she can't breathe and she's essentially dead. For about 4 minutes, 45 seconds into the call, Miss Shemirani is told the ETA of the ambulance is 20 minutes and she calls out, oh, come on, she's dying, she's dying. Miss Leonette says, please, please, you need to understand this is more than critical, which aside from anything else means that Kate has lied about the paramedics.
It's quite interesting as well. Like, so she waits half an hour before she phones her friend. The minute her friend turns up, her friend's like, no, call the fucking ambulance. What are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then she's screaming down the phone saying she's dying.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you know,
Hmm.
you could make the argument that she's panicked. I don't think any of this is malicious. Like, well, it is. You could make the argument that she's in panic. You could make the argument that she's administering CPR or she's trying to do her own thing or whatever. But there is a lot of room there for criticism, a lot of room, and also it shows that she's lying. She's lying about. She knows she's not choking on food. She knows there's some sort of a mass there, and she also that this means that she must be lying about the paramedics. Robin Bass, who you remember is one of the paramedics, said gave out oral evidence and explained that he's employed by the South East Coast Ambulance Service as a paramedic, an operational team leader. On the 19th of July, he was first on scene, arriving at about 1822 when he found Paloma on the floor of her bedroom and saw that Miss Shemirani was carrying out cardiopulmonary resuscitation appropriately. The fact that this was being performed and the fact that Paloma was not responding with a gag reflex to the presence of an oropharyngeal airway, which had already been placed, was consistent with Paloma being in cardiac arrest. Ms. Bass said that he assessed Paloma himself and found that she was definitely in cardiac arrest, which is why they administered adrenaline, because she was dead. Kate told the paramedics that Paloma, she said, reported that Paloma had been diagnosed with a mediastinal mass for which she was not receiving active treatment, but alternative treatment was being used. When asked, she said, this might be non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, or it might be an infection. But Paloma did not have a formal diagnosis, which raises several questions. One, it shows that Kate has acknowledged the fact that there could be non-Hodgkin's lymphoma tumor there, which obviously was the case. And two, that Paloma did not receive a formal diagnosis. So what were those other clinics in Mexico and Iran doing? Why is that? How are they even beginning to treat Paloma if there's not a, in inverted commas, formal diagnosis? Except here's the problem. She did have a formal diagnosis. She had a formal diagnosis from the NHS. Now, Kay will say, oh, she only had a differential diagnosis. The histology was never properly done. We shall come on to that. She then said that she was choking, potentially on food. The paramedic said that the tumor was so forcefully blocking Paloma's throat that he struggled to get his airway into her throat, which is again just horrible. So this is taken directly from the coroner's report. Dr. Anderson said that his best hypothesis as to the cause of cardiac arrest was that Paloma had been unable to breathe through what was by then her very narrow airway. He said that on the 24th of July, the ventilator, this is when she's in the hospital on the life support, the ventilator had not been able to deliver oxygen. And when he tried to ventilate by manual bag, it was extremely tight with no air reaching the upper lobe of her right lung. So the tumor had continued to grow to the point where it had almost completely blocked off her airway. And even mechanical ventilation was not able to get air into her lungs. Dr. Anderson told me that prior to her death, he'd spoken to Dr. Miss Shemirani and had been clear about Paloma's poor prognosis. He said that Miss Shemirani, that's Kay, indicated that she was seeking expert advice from the United States, but he had explained that the hospital was working in accordance with UK guidelines and law. He could not recall any concerns being raised about the management by the ambulance service or HEMS on the 19th of July 2024, which means that Kay didn't start her nonsense about the paramedics killing Paloma until after, possibly after she died. She'd retconned it. It'd be interesting to find out the first day that she implied that the paramedics had killed her daughter. Just to clarify, they didn't mention it to either the paramedics or the hospital, which they then trusted to keep Paloma on life support for 6 days. you would have thought that either they would have taken her to a different hospital or would have raised concerns that, you know, your staff are murdering people. But that didn't happen. This is important. Dr. Anderson was asked whether the administration of adrenaline could have caused or contributed to her condition and death, and he said categorically that it had not. Paloma had received the standard adult dose of adrenaline in accordance with the national protocol, and that on the 999 call, which he had heard, Ms. Shemirani had indicated that Paloma's oxygen saturations had, at 10 or 15 minutes into the arrest, been 35%. Which he said was critically low and risked brain damage. So she's been denied oxygen for a long time. That's 10 or 15 minutes into the arrest. The ambulance didn't arrive for another 10 minutes, depending on whether it's 10 or 15 minutes. It took 22 minutes to get there. So this is horrible, but it would appear that basically the conditions had been there, that had the adrenaline been administered or not, the same outcome would have happened, which is tragic. But the adrenaline was literally her only hope, and it did bring her back to life. Sadly, by that time, the damage due to the lack of oxygen was far too great. Mrs. Shemirani asked whether the adrenaline, which had been administered by the emergency teams, could have caused an iatrogenic collapse. And Dr. Anderson said that Paloma collapsed long before the paramedics arrived, so the collapse could not be attributed to the adrenaline. He admitted that the medication could be associated with a pulmonary edema, which is one of the things that Kate says is how they kill you with adrenaline. But in this case, that definitely didn't happen because there was no edema found. So it couldn't have been that. So the mechanism by which Kay is saying that the adrenaline killed her daughter couldn't have happened. Also, it is clear by Kay's own words and own medical recordings that Paloma was A, in cardiac arrest, and B, had sadly had her oxygen blocked off for sufficient time to cause irreparable brain damage. In response to questions from Gabriel Shemirani, Dr. Anderson said that the brain injury suffered by Paloma meant that she'd already had no chance of recovery, even before she'd reached hospital. He was asked whether her prospects would have been better if Mrs. Shemirani had called for an ambulance immediately. And the witness said that when someone's heart stops, the sooner you get it going again, the better the outcome is likely to be. Brain damage is detectable after about 3 minutes without oxygen. And for every further minute, the level of damage is worse without resuscitation. The required response is therefore to call an ambulance and start resuscitation immediately. However, he was not able to comment on the impact of the delay.
I mean, it took 30 minutes to ring the friend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a big, I don't
know. I know. And so it's increasingly, well, it's impossible that the paramedics murdered her, or even that their actions contributed to her death. They didn't. They were a last gasp attempt to try and save a very, very poorly person that had not had any treatment. So these are the conclusions. I accept fully the evidence given by Dr. Goals, Mohan and O'Connor that there is no doubt that the mass was a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and that any further testing to find a subtype would have made no difference to the course of treatment offered. The subtype would have only made a difference to second-line treatment. Now, put a pin in that because we'll come back to that. What that implies, some people might be listening to that and going, see, they didn't do any of the other testing. It was still a differential diagnosis. We'll come on to that. Ms. Shemirani tried in correspondence and in questioning of all clinical staff involved to explore alternative conditions and has referred to there being only a differential diagnosis, and I find it is highly likely that she seeded some form of doubt in Paloma's mind as to her diagnosis. I find that when Paloma was in Mason Hospital, she understood and accepted that she had lymphoma and cancer. Paloma initially consented to the treatment offered by the hospital during that admission, and that included consenting to the administration of prednisolone and rasburicase. So Kay lied about that as well. So we were correct in our assumption that basically she'd initially said, yes, of course I'll do that, then phoned her mum, who she was at the time estranged from due to a history of abuse from Kay, which according to the coroner's report and came out in the inquest, was seemingly ubiquitous. She's knocking her ex-husband about, he's knocking her about, they're all taking it out on the children, to the point where at the time of Paloma's diagnosis, 3 of the 4 children were estranged, 2 of them permanently from Kay. It's horrible. The doubts about consent only surfaced after Miss Shemirani became involved, and I found that Miss Shemirani adversely influenced Paloma to come to the position that she had not consented when she had. So there, she retconned it again. This was in part at least due to Miss Shemirani's unfounded misconceptions that rasburicase was given as part of chemotherapy or as part of a trial about which Paloma had not been informed. So she lied about that. She had consented to the rasburicase, and the rasburicase could not have caused the health problems that Paloma had. For avoidance of doubt, I found that the allegations by Dr. Miss Shemirani regarding the treatment offered by the Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells NHS Trust and by Dr. Mohan in particular are totally unfounded. I'm entirely satisfied that Paloma was given and offered standard management and treatment for an established diagnosis, and that efforts to re-engage Paloma were appropriate in all circumstances. I'm satisfied that following her disengagement from Maidstone Hospital, Miss Shemirani took a leading role in advising Paloma in respect of and facilitating access to alternative treatments. She arranged inexplicably a consultation with a cardiologist, which Paloma did agree to attend, but despite Dr. Mann's advice, she took no steps to encourage or persuade Paloma to engage with the independent specialist services at the Royal Marsden Hospital, where Paloma could have received more information about her diagnosis and a second opinion about her treatment options. I find that it is likely that Paloma would have been willing to attend and consider what that hospital advised had she been encouraged to do so, and on the basis of the evidence, I cannot understand why she was not encouraged to engage with this opportunity. I find, though, that Ms. Shemirani did in fact know and fully understand that Paloma had a mass lymphoma and therefore had cancer. I'm going to read that again. I find Ms. Shemirani, Kate, did in fact know and fully understood that Paloma, her daughter, had a mass, had lymphoma, and therefore had cancer. It is difficult for me to assess whether she did or did not believe that Gerson therapy could cure that disease, as she was unwilling to provide me with clear and frank evidence. But even if she did, I find it incomprehensible that she did not encourage Paloma to monitor the effectiveness of the regime by means of a repeat scan, as had been planned and was urged by the GP. So Kate knew that Paloma had cancer, and she was advising her to do Gerson therapy, which in the inquest, which, you know, it's a court, she refused to say was effective or not.
And the GP then must have also said, okay, fine, it's up to you if you don't want to do like our treatment, but if you're going to do that treatment, come back.
Monitor it. Yeah, monitor it with scans, which they didn't
even
do.
know that.
Crazy. And I think that GP must have been Dr. Aziz. So at least Dr. Aziz was saying, all right, fine, okay, let's just keep an eye on this. And for whatever reason, Kay has gone into full-blown denial. Wait until you hear this bit. I find that, as stated above, Paloma had now come to believe that she did not have cancer. That's fucked up.
What the fuck did they think they had?
I don't know, but she had a mass, and that the Gerson therapy would eventually work to reduce this mass, and presumably that this mass was a reaction to the rasburicase or some sort of infection or something like that. that was not life-threatening and would eventually sort itself out. That's fucking horrific. I cannot accept that Mrs. Shemirani believed this, and it is extremely difficult to understand why she did not escalate matters medically for her daughter at this stage. I find Ms. Shemirani's failure to seek appropriate advice and assistance, even when it was abundantly clear Paloma needed it, to be egregious and incomprehensible, all the more so for someone who was once a nurse. I mean, just fucking hell. She's got the maternal instincts of a fucking cuckoo. Like, that's so bad. She knew Paloma had cancer. She advised Paloma to do an alternative therapy for cancer, but somehow managed to convince this poor dying girl that she didn't have cancer. This is monstrous. This is fucking monstrous. It goes on to say, I find that the use of adrenaline was within the guidelines for the use in those over 12 years of age and was appropriately given via intraosseous route by the ambulance crew. It is likely the adrenaline kept her alive at this time, and it certainly did not cause or hasten her death. The brain damage that Paloma suffered was as a result of the obstruction of the airway by the tumor and a reduction in oxygen supply to her brain, and had already begun long before the ambulance crews attended. So that was not caused by the adrenaline either. On the basis of all these findings, I do consider that I can conclude that the influence which was brought to bear on Paloma, on her view and understanding of her diagnosis, and on her decision-making as to the treatment and management of her illness, taken as a whole, did contribute more than minimally to her death. I've concluded above that Drs. and Mrs. Shemirani's unwillingness or inability to accept the reality, namely that Paloma's death resulted from the progression of her mass, is because the disease was left untreated. I cannot conclude without passing some comment on the behavior of Dr. and Ms. Shemirani. Their correspondence and approach to the court and their persistent pursuit of utterly groundless assertions as to the cause of death and unfounded allegations in relation to the steps being taken by others who tried to treat their daughter during the course of the hearing has been reprehensible. Now, this is so. The parents of Paloma were more than minimally responsible for the death of their daughter. They contributed more than minimally to the death of their own daughter. And they're going to have to live with that for the rest of their life. And they know that. They must know that because they're not stupid. They are, greedy and, devious and desperate for attention and willing to literally put their daughter as an experiment to try and gain gravitas within the conspiracy world, which we must remember is some strangers on the fucking internet. But it wasn't considered an unlawful killing. And obviously this made Gabriel and Sebastian very angry, and I can totally understand why. Gabriel tweets out the quote, I found Ms. Shemirani's care of her daughter incomprehensible, but not an unlawful killing. And he quote tweets, this just in, the state says you can lawfully kill your own daughter. He went on to say that the coroner's determined Kay's conduct towards my sister did not break the law. So let's take a look at the behavior that the coroner has found to be completely lawful. 1, falsifying a dying woman's court statement is entirely legal. Gabriel Shemirani's High Court proceedings were, I find, entirely motivated by his desire to persuade Paloma to undergo treatment, although the evidence does suggest that the proceedings in fact caused her distress and anxiety and may have been counterproductive. However, in this regard, I will note that this appears to me to be a further area in which Paloma was not well served by those who were advising her. I find that Paloma's own indication that others were managing the situation for her reflected the reality, and I have real doubts as to how much of the witness statement submitted reflected her own words. Remember the really poorly written one that was almost as badly written as some of the shit that Kay writes? Given the subject matter of the proceedings, lawfare approach was inappropriate and unhelpful to Paloma. I find, and I have real concerns that Dr. Ajaz, who was providing both counselling and what were intended to be independent assessment, was too involved. I've been particularly concerned that he kept no, then it cuts off. Gabriel goes on to say, it is legal to ignore that your doctor has cancer and to continue to refuse medical interventions. And this is the bit that we've already read, that I find, though, that Miss Shemirani did in fact know and fully understood that Paloma had a mass, had lymphoma, and therefore had cancer. It's difficult for me to believe that Gerson therapy, it's difficult for me to assess whether she did or did not believe that Gerson therapy could cure the disease, as she was unwilling to provide me with clear and frank evidence. But even if she did, I find it incomprehensible that she did not encourage Paloma to monitor the effectiveness of the regime by means of a repeat scan, as had been planned and as was urged by her GP. In fact, it was, I find, clear that Gerson therapy, even taken together with hyperbaric oxygen therapy and cranial osteopathy, were not capable of curing Paloma's lymphoma. There is no evidence that Gerson therapy can cure cancer, and any claims to the contrary are without any evidence base and misguided. This may well have been a therapy which assists with well-being and general health, but absolutely no more. 3, it is legal to override your daughter's decision to receive life-saving treatment. And this is the bit that we've said where they're saying that they absolutely did take control. So she did take control over other events when she knew of Paloma's diagnosis. It's clear from her behavior in the hospital, her assertions that she would seek second opinions, and the voice note to Paloma's then boyfriend. Thereafter, she played a real role in identifying those who provided services to and advised Paloma. Thereafter, her care went beyond a mother's duty, and she was clearly monitoring Paloma's progress, for example, by taking regular oxygen saturation readings and supplying oxygen when needed. I find she took on what could be described as nursing and care coordinating responsibilities, and I find that a duty of care arose. So far as evidence of breaching that duty is concerned, in view of all the findings set out above, I do consider that Miss Shemirani did not meet the duty of care which arose in relation to the role that she'd taken on. So she'd let her daughter down. She absolutely let her daughter down. She was doing oxygen saturation tests, but refusing to monitor the growth of the tumor in her daughter's chest, whilst continuing to go down the route of alternative cancer treatments, which she thought would cure her, apparently, whilst convincing Paloma that she didn't have cancer. I will not. I have already identified my concerns over her adverse influence over Paloma's understanding, treatment, and management of her diagnosis, and I won't repeat them. I also do not accept that she was encouraging Paloma to come to her own fully informed decision on matters, treatments, and then simply respecting those decisions. Rather, I find that she was encouraging and influencing Paloma to take the route that she did, and then failing to ensure monitoring of her progress and medical escalation in the face of deterioration. So that's despicable. She's and you could even go further and suggest that she was bullying her. Some of those texts suggested that she was bullying Paloma into doing what she said, without even mentioning the "I am the only one that can save you. Don't bite the hand that feeds." That's despicable.
That's
shit.
the pin that I've been waiting for the whole time, because that is some cult leadership as well,
isn't it? Isn't it
right?
just? Yeah,
that is cult leadership right there. I am the only one who can help you, and don't bite the hand that feeds. How abusive is that?
that's
The coercive relationship. Oh my goodness!
It's shit, isn't it? It's just despicable. It
that
totally
to
is.
me is you are responsible for what happened.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that you could build in the argument. It goes on to say, finally, it's lawful to delay calling the ambulance whilst you call a friend, whilst your daughter cardiac arrests. And then it's the passage of essentially she waited and didn't call the ambulance for some time. Sebastian tweets out, and this is an explanation as to why it wasn't considered an unlawful killing. Result: The authorities have failed us. The coroner did find that Kay's actions and beliefs likely caused Paloma's unnatural death. But of the 5 points needed for them to find what Kay did was an unlawful killing and therefore start legal proceedings, we only got 3. So the 5 points needed for unlawful killing under British law and what the coroner found: Kay had a duty of care to Paloma, and Kay was negligent with his duty of care, and the negligence created a serious and obvious risk of Paloma's death. So all of those were found to have met the threshold, and this is where the coroner felt that it didn't meet the threshold of an unlawful killing. He didn't think that the negligence significantly contributed to the death. The coroner said Kay wasn't alone in giving Paloma false medical advice, because many of Kay's crazy disciples were also advising Paloma. So they can't be sure that it was only Kay's negligence that led to the death. We find this ridiculous because the disciples were handpicked by Kay to talk to Paloma, so they were essentially extensions of Kay's decisions. Does this mean conspiracy theory influencers have a license to kill so long as they do it as a team? And I have to say, I agree there that she was the conduit towards all of that. She was even like, you know, you could make the argument that Paloma was an adult and she'd come to and she was anti-vax or whatever, and this potentially informed her ideas of the NHS. But where she got that from? She's got that from growing up with her mother as well. And then the final was that the negligence was so gross as to justify a criminal conviction. The coroner didn't bother to decide this because he felt that he'd stopped at the previous point. But we guessed that the answer would be yes if the previous 4 conditions were also met. So overall, this is a ridiculous and disappointing result. After over 20 years of abuse, we almost had Kay nailed to the wall. Now she's free to kill again. And the brothers have got a couple of options. They absolutely plan to do a judicial review, which is basically to take it to an appeals court and to say that they don't think that the inquest has come to the correct decision, and they can hopefully argue the case again. And that's quite interesting, because if you remember, Dr. Shemirani said that he was going to bring a judicial review because they'd refused to look at the evidence that the paramedics killed Paloma, which is not true. They did look at that evidence and they found that it was not possible. It wasn't possible. So just to reiterate, Kay has lied about absolutely every aspect of the case. And to sort of bolster this, she's also brought out this sort of broader concept of organ theft, which she's also lied about. And every single paper, every single piece of evidence that she's brought forward has been misrepresented. And I will say this again, it relies on her as presuming that her followers are too lazy or stupid to read. Sometimes to read the things that she actually posts on Twitter. Like, she's still doing it. Today, someone was saying, you killed your daughter, and she said, what, you mean the doctors killed her? I said, no, you killed her. The doctors didn't do the histology. Paloma only had a differential diagnosis. Someone called Athletics on Twitter posted, Kate Shemirani has been posting for months about how Paloma only had a differential diagnosis and could not be confirmed and did not have lymphoma. Turns out all the differentials were lymphoma subtypes. Dr. Amit Goel told me that he was the consultant histopathologist at Maidstone Hospital who examined the biopsy taken from the mass lymphoma, and is one of his areas of specialism. 4 core biopsies in 1 block were examined, and these were sufficient for reliable histological testing and diagnosis. Oh, so they did have the histology. Oh, so that's another thing that Kate's lied about. He said that specific findings led him to conclude with certainty that Paloma had high-grade B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a cancer. His colleagues, Professor Schofield and Dr. Mani Padnam, agreed with his findings. In his report, which was provided to the clinical team on the 20th of December 2023, he wrote that there were differential diagnoses as to the subtype. The possibilities were diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, primary mediastinal lymphoma, and mediastinal gray zone lymphoma. Dr. Gold said that it's difficult to diagnose subtype definitively from the biopsy tissue alone. Therefore, the findings are discussed subsequently at multidisciplinary team meetings. He had conducted immunoprofiling, the outcome of which led him to consider that Paloma's disease was best regarded as diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, but the other two subtypes could not be definitively excluded. So they did do the histology, and what they determined was that the differential diagnosis, if you remember where we said that was, we think it's this, but it could be other stuff, so we'll go off and have a look at it. The only other possibilities that it could have been would have been other types of lymphoma. So they did do the histology, they did move past the differential diagnosis, and they found that it's the alternative possibilities were other types of lymphoma. Now, this is very, very sad. Athletics goes on to say, and this is in the coroner's report, the recommended chemotherapy was the same for all presented subtypes. Poor Paloma needed support from her parents, not scaremongering. I hope that anybody who still trusts Kate Shemirani takes 5 minutes to read the coroner's report. Dr. Mohan said that Paloma's case had been referred to on the 21st of December as an urgent basis because the mass presented a risk of compromise of Paloma's airways and adjacent vessels. She explained that the lymphoma was high grade, meaning that the disease was aggressive and progressing rapidly. But that, as a B-cell lymphoma, it was treatable and had a better chance of cure than T-cells type. She saw Dr. Gold's report and was aware that there were differential diagnoses as to the subtype of lymphoma, but she explained that all three subtypes were high-grade lymphomas requiring treatment by means of R-CHOP chemotherapy with steroids, which was the standard and only treatment. The differential diagnosis did not need to be further explored, therefore, before starting initial treatment. Given the bulky mass, treatment was required urgently, and without it, the disease would inevitably progress. In response to Mishrami's questions, Dr. Mohan reiterated the outcome of further pathology testing, in particular fish testing, which may have come later, would not have affected treatment at this stage. So for all of her going on about there was no histology and there was only a differential diagnosis, so it didn't prove that she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Well, she did. That was what was the actual cause. But the only other possibilities were done through histological testing were other types of lymphoma. So if their initial diagnosis had been wrong, but if they'd still gone down the chemotherapy route, there was still an 80% chance that Paloma would have survived. The whole thing is brutal. It's absolutely monstrous. Like, she knew her daughter had cancer. She refused to even do the same treatment that she herself had undergone for cancer. Remember that she presents herself as like, I know all about this because I rejected mainstream medicine. No, you didn't. You had surgery. You absolutely had surgery. And you refused aftercare radiation, right? Okay, which was stupid. And you somehow got away with it. Lucky. You knew your daughter had cancer. You lied to her. You told her that this treatment that you don't think works, which you sell to other vulnerable people, would help her. But you avoided monitoring the growth of her tumor in order to present this reality so that you could get some sort of cachet as the person who cured your daughter's disease, which is insane because you must have known that it wasn't going to work. You said you were going for alternative treatments in Iran and Mexico. You didn't. You said that you were providing a duty of care. You didn't. You said that you weren't the person that was trying to influence your daughter, but you absolutely did. You even to the point of trying to become take the power of attorney. And then when it all blew up in your face, you panicked. You didn't react correctly. And then retroactively, you tried to change what had happened and blame people, other people, for your negligence against your daughter. Your negligence allowed your daughter to die, and it was needless. It was needless outside of an ego trip, outside of a pathetic. You must secretly loathe yourself for the need to do something as reckless as that in order to prove that you're of worth in this world.
And the hero in her journey.
Yeah. It's
That's
appalling.
what it all comes down to with these goddamn conspiracy theorists. At the end of the day, there is that they are on their hero's journey and they've just sacrificed absolutely everything for confirmation bias mixed with clout when it comes to influencers.
Sickening. Absolutely sickening.